Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are set to return to OTAs this week. We'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And to preview that, I've got Ray Fittipaldo on the show here. We're going to be talking all things Steelers, what to expect with OTAs. And, of course, we got to talk Pirates. We got Jason Mackey. I want his perspective on what Paul Skenes has done in his first two starts and the Pirates' win in the series over the Cubs. All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo. We're both of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can read all our work at post-gazette.com, but you can find this podcast and all of our podcasts on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Just search Post-Gazette Sports, and you'll find all of our daily content. This show, the North Shore Drive podcast, comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, breaking down all things Pittsburgh sports. And as always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 20 televisions ready to watch TV, but over 500 different beers. 300 of those beers are from local Pittsburgh areas, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap at all time. We'll have more on them later. The best bar in all of Pittsburgh. As I said, I'm joined by Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, we're back at the Steelers facility this week. We're going to get to see a lot of things, and one of the things everyone's waiting to see is what will the dynamic be in this quarterback room. We kind of got a chance to be used to the Steelers quarterbacks for a couple years with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph. But all those guys are gone now, and now the story is just about Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. What's your anticipation as far as what we'll be watching for when we see OTAs and we see these two quarterbacks that just came from other teams?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Chris, I think we've seen a lot of leadership already from Russell Wilson, just in the way he's greeted new teammates and the draft picks. But now I kind of want to see it on the field in person. I think he's done everything right to this point since he's gotten here. Now I want to see what it looks like on the field. How does he command the offense? What is his interaction with some of the younger players that he's going to have to get to know in short order to make this offense work? So that's number one for me. Number two is, this will be the first opportunity for us as reporters to speak with Justin Fields. And, unless I missed it, I don't think he did any exit interviews out of Chicago. So, what does he feel about being traded for a 6th-round pick? How does he feel about being a backup for the first time in his career? These are all things that hopefully we'll get some answers to on Tuesday afternoon when the first practice is over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all eyes will be on who will the Steelers kind of put out there to talk to, and will we get a chance to talk to Justin Fields? Because, you guys got a chance to talk to Russell Wilson, and he's been very public about joining the Steelers, but Justin Fields is a different position. Like, this was a high first-round pick that the Bears spent that was supposed to be their franchise quarterback that didn't work. And like you said, there was no big goodbye. There was a debate if they would even use the pick on the quarterback for a bit, because they thought they might have their franchise quarterback. And then when they had a chance to Caleb Williams, well, that went out the door. And so now he's on his second team, and like you said, he's most likely going to be the backup, at least as how the pole position's been laid out for everyone to see. So how will he take that, and how will this quarterback room work together, Ray? Because that's been a huge part of the dynamic in the past for the Steelers when it comes to like Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph even. But then last year, and how when Mitch Trubisky took over for Kenny Pickett, and then Mason Rudolph took over Kenny Pickett, and then Kenny Pickett saying he wasn't learning anything when we watched Mason Rudolph do well. Yeah. Like, it'll be interesting to see how different things are when you're bringing in two veterans to kind of both lead the way, one old, one young, and them competing with each other.
Yeah, I mean, first off, let's acknowledge the obvious. It is a unique situation that both of these guys are on one-year deals. Basically, they're both in their first seasons, and I think it's imperative for both to get off to really good starts. And I think the only way this goes sideways, for Russ, Chris, is if he gets off to a bad start, because then the questions are going to mount. why don't you go to Justin Fields, especially the way that schedule played out? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you got a bunch of winnable games in the first half of the season. If it doesn't start off well for Russ, then, there could potentially be a distraction there. But as long as Russ Wilson in that offense, as long as they're putting up points, as long as there's some, wins being had in the first part of that season, then I think everything will be good. The only way that this gets a little bit messy for the quarterback's room is if Russ plays bad, then you got a quarterback controversy. And you and I both know that even though they made the playoffs last year, that wasn't always a productive situation when your starting quarterback either gets replaced, like Kenny Pickett did when he was injured, or when a guy gets benched, like Kenny Pickett did once Mason Rudolph started playing well late in the season. I know they made the playoffs, but the best scenario for the Steelers is for Russ Wilson to play well and for them to win games with a veteran quarterback.
Certainly. And also, I think even beyond just playing well, I think Russell Wilson, one of his biggest roles, and I've talked about this before on the show, but I think that one of the biggest things is they need him to help reset the offensive side when it comes to leadership, because I talked about this with Ryan Shazier the week of the draft when we had him on this very show. There's been a succession of leadership on defense going back to like the early 2000s, where you go look at, Casey Hampton and James Ferrier, and then Troy Polamalu, and then James Harrison, and then Lawrence Timmons and Cam Heyward and Ryan Shazier to today, TJ Watt. It's still Cam Heyward, Minka Fitzpatrick. Any leaders that have always existed there. The offense kind of had that for a bit, but then when Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown just up and left out of nowhere, and then both Pouncey and DeCastro retired earlier than the Steelers thought, and then Ben Roethlisberger, his career ending up the way it did, and there was no quarterback for him to pass the torch to. All those leaders kind of got we're kind of just off the Steelers, and there was never a chance for them to pass things down. And I think that they've been hoping that this can get rekindled by some of the young guys. Kenny Pickett at quarterback didn't work. Najee Harris at running back. I think that he's done some things, but clearly none of them have had a chance to kind of galvanize and recreate a culture on the offensive side of the ball. And whereas, yes, there's part of that goes to coaching, a lot of it still depends on players stepping up and being leaders. So I look at this, and with Russell Wilson, like you said, how does he help reset the offense and the culture of the offense and kind of set it up so that younger guys can step into leadership roles for the future?
Yeah, listen, I think when you have a revolving door at quarterback, it's almost like your leadership in your offensive room has to be divided among the position groups, right? I think that was a big reason why they went out and got Isaac Seumalo last year, right?
Yeah.
Offensive line was in transition. They needed that big alpha dog in the room, somebody that could be a leader and that could be followed. I think Seumalo did that really well. Now, hopefully, that offensive line is growing, and Seumalo is going to be here for at least one more year and probably 2 more years. But I think they needed to get that situated. So hopefully, Russell Wilson comes in. He not only could lead the quarterback room, but now he can oversee the entire offense. Whereas when you have a younger quarterback, I think that could be a little bit more murky. Now, don't ask me about the receivers room or the running backs room. I have no idea who's leading those groups. Not ideal there when, George Pickens is your most tenured receiver, and we all know the issues he's had. And even Najee. Najee was a captain early in his career. I don't know if I want to say he had it stripped away from him, but he wasn't a captain last season. And then, there's that whole dynamic with Jaylen Warren coming down the road where he's likely going to be this team starter after this season. So I think they have the offensive line room situated. I think they obviously have the quarterback room situation. So hopefully Russ can just kind of lead the entire group now as opposed to the way it was last season.
Indeed. I want to get to some of those other positions and what specifically we're looking at here on the North Shore Drive podcast when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Stick with us. We're going to talk more about OTAs and what we're expecting to see this week, as well as some Pittsburgh Pirates talk with Jason Mackey. All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. But first, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they're right on the North Shore, right across the street from PNC Park on Federal Street. They have over 20 televisions. They have outdoor seating. They're an amazing place to go before, during, and after Pirates Pirates games at PNC Park, or even if you're just having a night out on the town and you want to enjoy the beautiful North Shore of Pittsburgh, you could get right outside. You can see right across the Clemente Bridge and see the amazing downtown skyline. But inside, you can enjoy all the different sporting events that are on TV. If you're enjoying the playoffs, the NHL, the NBA, or just sports in general, maybe you're watching all the different baseball games going on. They have over 20 televisions, and they can tune into whatever game you want. They even get fights, anything that you want from on sports. They'll be able to get on their televisions, and you can also try one of their 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area with all the amazing breweries that are popping up around here, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap at all times, and they're always switching new ones in and out, so you can always get a new experience every single time you go there. They also have amazing food like Steak on a Stone, where you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone. Every piece that you cut off, you press into the heated stone, eat yourself, and you choose how well done you want every single bite. It's the best bar in Pittsburgh. Go to Mike's Beer Bar today. When you get there, tell them Chris sent you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's get into other positions here. By the way, you can read Ray's preview of OTAs on Steelers OTAs 5 storylines to watch as the full team gathers for the first time on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It published this Monday morning. But Ray, let's get to some of these other positions, and let's start with wide receiver, because that's one of the biggest question marks as far as how that will end up being comprised by the end of the season, or how the depth chart will unfold, because a lot of people have presumed that the Steelers are going to simply sign or trade for another veteran wide receiver to add to this room, because people aren't sold on everyone past George Pickens. You know, Roman Wilson was the rookie, and everyone's excited for Roman Wilson, but he's a 3rd-round draft pick rookie. Can he step up and be the number 2? People aren't sure. And then behind him is Van Jefferson the number 3? Is Calvin Austin ready to step up into that role, or Quez Watkins, or Scotty Miller, or one of the number of other receivers they signed for very cheap deals this year? I think the Steelers, and you and I have talked about this, I think the Steelers are kind of in a position where they feel comfortable enough to see what they can get out of this group in OTAs, and then maybe a little bit out of training camp. But then if they feel that none of this group is ready to step up and be a solid number 2 or a solid number 3, maybe then they make a move. But I'm intrigued to see what we get to see out of this group now that they're going to be all together in OTAs.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to point out, when you have football in shorts, you don't want to make any quick judgments on, what the rotation is going to be, or, even what the starting lineup is going to be. I think if you remember, last year, you do want to see like some flashes, though. Remember, Cory Trice had a great month in OTAs and minicamp, and then, he had the unfortunate injury. So you kind of want to, see what's there, but, the real football isn't really going to start until July or so. So unfortunately, Roman Wilson is at the NFL rookie premiere. So he'll miss at least, I think, the first practice or 2. Then we'll get to see him later in the week, and then in subsequent weeks of OTAs. But, I think he's the linchpin, Chris. I think if he could step up and be the number 2, I think naturally, Quez Watkins and Scotty Miller and all those other guys will kind of find their home. But if Roman Wilson doesn't step up and assume that number 2 job, then, I think that the trade rumors and all that other stuff will resurface here later in the summer.
Certainly. I think that's kind of what the Steelers are kind of just waiting to see. They don't want to necessarily jump at signing or trading for someone that they end up being like, whoa, that was excessive. Didn't need that guy, when you can use that to maybe get another position. And one of those other positions that could be addressed is cornerback. And that's because the Steelers don't officially have a starting slot cornerback at this point in time. And they also aren't sure about their depth at outside corner. Donte Jackson was traded for with the Diontae Johnson trade, and presumably he's your number 2 corner next to Joey Porter Jr. But behind him are a bunch of guys who are looking to prove themselves in the NFL. Cory Trice returning from last year's injury. I think that'll be something to watch, certainly, to see how he does. But also the Ryan Watts guy they've added. Also Darius Rush. They have a lot of these guys that fit this profile of longer cornerbacks that can play on the outside, be a little bit more physical. How will that shake out? And, if let's say the Steelers feel better about their wide receiver room than necessarily their cornerback room going into training camp, maybe that's the position that they target more so with trade talks or any free agency positions.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point about the lack of depth in the cornerback room overall, but I think Cory Trice is an interesting prospect, and I think that's what these next 10, 13 practices are all about here over the next month or so. Run those young guys out there, make your evaluations on them, and then proceed throughout the offseason after what you learned here in OTAs and minicamp. So Cory Trice is going to have a great opportunity. Maybe he's your depth. Maybe he's your replacement for James Pierre. He's your gunner on special teams, and he's one of your backups on the outside. Now, slot corner, I think, is a different story. We kind of know that Cam Sutton is still out there. His situation remains unresolved. Patrick Peterson, Shannon Sullivan even, both remain unsigned. I don't know what that says about their play last season, but both those guys are still out there if the Steelers wanted to go back to them, if Beanie Bishop or any of these other guys who are trying to find a home in the slot don't pan out this spring. So, both those positions are interesting. I tend to think the corner is a little bit more pressing because you don't have a starter per se at an important position. But, depending on how things go this summer and really how Arthur Smith, decides to deploy his weapons, receiver can kind of be on the back burner until they see what they have. So I'm watching both positions, but, if you had to ask me which is the more dire position right now, I'd say corner, just because there's an opening at slot and there's not much quality depth behind those starters.
I think it's a very reasonable take because, the Steelers defense is supposed to still be the leading factor of this team. And there's a question at the cornerback position that could be a weakness that teams exploit. Linebacker seems to be the position that has been shored up more so. So maybe, when everyone's been looking at a new addition at the wide receiver position, maybe it's cornerback that everyone should be looking at right now. There's still free agents out there that the Steelers could sign. And then there's also the trade market that could be put on display there. So lots of different directions they can go there. But there's other situations going on right now. We talked last week about Cam Heyward's, potential holdout with the OT. He's not going to attend OTAs. What'll happen if he skips mini camp or if he comes to mini camp and practices by himself on the side like TJ Watt, Diontae Johnson, Alex Highsmith, Minka Fitzpatrick all did. What's your makeout? Because we talked to Brian, but I want to hear your take on just what's led to this Cam Heyward situation, and if you see this developing into a bigger thing.
I think it certainly can develop into a bigger thing. Chris, my take is, Omar was the cap guy before he became GM, so I don't think their thinking on these contracts have changed much over the years. So whenever they've wanted a guy to take a pay cut, they would do it in March, and they would make it their business to get it done before the new league year. So when they didn't do anything with Cam, it signaled to me that they were willing to move forward with that $16 million salary and that $22 million cap hit, and then have the freedom to move on after this season if Cam doesn't work out. Now Cam is putting them in a situation where he wants more money and he wants more term on his contract, before he theoretically steps back onto the field. So nothing's, mini camp is mandatory, but they're not going to fine Cam Heyward if he doesn't show up to mini camp. The thing to watch is Latrobe. Does he do the hold in, that sort of thing? That kind of ratchets up the pressure on the front office a little bit. The coaching staff, is going to, start griping that he's not out there. But to me, if I'm the Steelers front office, I want to see if he can bounce back from last season before I give him any new money. So it's an interesting dynamic. I don't know where it's going to go, but as of right now, missing OTAs, to me, that's not a big deal at all.
Yeah, that I agree. Like right now, this is, if we're gonna go, with DEF CONs, I'd say this is like a DEF CON 4-3 at this point. Just kind of like, something could happen, but it would still take something would still have to happen for them to even be too concerned here. But I do think you're right about the Steelers. They kind of want to be able to say, hey, how healthy is Cam? How much can he go through training camp, not get injured, and then play a whole season? Because here's the thing: is also before his injury last year, he played played back-to-back 17-game seasons with 10-plus sacks in each year. So, theoretically, if he was able to get back to that, he'd be worth, the extension. But the question is then, even if he does get back to that, how long can he do that for? Because he'll be 35 years old. And, I know that Cam Heyward doesn't like it when we bring up his age, when we ask him questions, but that's a realistic thing the Steelers have to consider when they're trying to build their roster for the future right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he would really be an outlier, if he got better with age after his age 35 year. He turned 35 a few weeks ago. So, by the end of the season, he'll be 35 and a half years old. And you just don't see interior defensive linemen who take a pounding like he does hold up at that age. I mean, it just doesn't happen very often. So that's another dynamic to this. There's not a whole lot of, other players that you could look at who did this. I know the Eagles kind of kept their older guys around, but those guys were more rotational edge guys, right? More so than interior guys who would, who would take the pounding that Cam did. So, we'll see where this goes, but it's a brutal position. It's a brutal game. And if Cam does find a way to bounce back and have a double-digit sack season, God bless him. But he would certainly be an outlier if he did that. When you have soft tissue injuries and you're getting older, those things tend to repeat. So hopefully Cam can find a way to overcome it. But to me, he's up against the odds here.
We'll certainly see how that plays out, but we'll be there all week long as OTAs occur. Do check us out at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, where Ray, Brian, Jerry, our whole Steelers team will be there. I'll be there as well, and we'll be talking about more about what we see on Wednesday's episode of the North Shore Drive podcast. But don't go anywhere. We may be done with the Steelers, but we got some Pirates to talk about. Jason Mackey, I want to get his thoughts on what the Pirates have been doing. We'll do that here on the North Shore Drive podcast right after this. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We switch topic to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and we bring our columnist in here, Jason Mackey. He's on the show. You can always catch him here on the Post-Gazette. Jason, when are you not working, man? Because I see you at Pitt stuff. I see you at Steelers stuff. I see you at Pirates. You are the man, always cranking it out. You were in Chicago, I think, just right for the Pirates.
Chris, you need to look in the mirror. When the heck did you stop moving?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I love it. It's not work. It's fun. I like seeing this stuff. And I mean, you've been to Chicago, I'm sure. Like, I'll take that every day of the week for Paul Skenes starting. And yeah, I love it, man. I love it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us. So let's talk about Paul Skenes, because he looks like he's having fun on the mound so far in his first two starts. You wrote about his being ready to come up and how well he's prepared for this. What are the elements of his game or the things that he's done to get there? If you could illustrate for our readers, by the way, you can read all his columns at post-gazette.com, where he's been talking about this whole time.
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into this, Chris, and I'm going to try to not blab for too long because I love watching Paul Skenes prepare, and I have a ton of respect for how he goes about his business. He is raised in a military family, as I've been writing about, like hyper disciplined, just a lot of care. He's very mature for his age. It's sometimes weird being around Paul and realizing like he's 21. He's not 38. He's not 43. He doesn't have kids. Like he just came out of college. It's just, he gets it, man. He gets it. Like you see veteran pitchers who on their start days, they're all business. They're looking at scouting reports, whatever. I mean, that's Paul basically every day. He is around the team. He's always out doing something. He's going somewhere to prepare. He's got a routine for this. He wants to look at this. He's manipulating, how the baseball moves, what he's doing like he's throwing a bullpen and he's looking at numbers that he's getting and he's fixing his delivery accordingly, blah, blah, blah. There's just so much intent that goes into it. And he doesn't function like a normal 21-year-old. We've seen it shoot. Maybe it's Ben Roethlisberger. Maybe it's Sidney Crosby and, maybe even Najee Harris, on a recent side, guys that come out of school and you're like, man, this guy does not handle himself like a rookie whatsoever. That's Paul Skenes.
It certainly seems that way. I mean, he seems mature. He seems to be able, and he also seems to be able to respond whenever there's a mistake or just something he has to adjust to. He just handles it, and I think I've been very impressed by that. And I mean, hey, this guy was supposed to be the truth when he was coming up, but different guys handle things differently. You know, not everyone handles being the ace and coming up and performing as well as he had. He already has 18 strikeouts in his first 2 starts, and that's just over 10 innings. He was absolutely on fire this past weekend. And there were some thinking like, oh, he shouldn't do his second start against the Cubs. That's the team he played the first time. Like they're gonna be used to it. And he was the one
it worked out okay.
just a little bit. But I wanted to get your thoughts too on just more parts of how Skenes is handling this versus maybe other aces that you've watched with their major debuts. I know you weren't covering when Garrett Cole came up, but that was a big thing that all of Pittsburgh turned to when it did happen.
Yeah, so a couple funny stories or anecdotes personally. I talked to Jamison Tywin in Chicago, and we arranged this. Like, I'm trying to work around his bullpen session and whatever. And so, like, I'm texting him. He tells me, he's like, meet me after my bullpen, whatever. So, like, we're talking on the field, like out toward left field. And I said, I wanted to ask you about that. And I pointed over to Skenes. He goes, that? I don't have any idea about that or whatever. It's like, I've never seen that sort of hype. So like J-Mo was big and pressured and all this stuff, but like, it wasn't Skenes. I remember covering Mitch Keller's debut. It was big and exciting, but it wasn't anywhere near Skenes. There wasn't like a traveling media contingent the way there was for Skenes. You don't have it on, national TV picking it up because, people care about this, or, national voices saying this is must-see TV. Like, I don't know if we've ever seen a level of hype for this, Chris. I really don't. And I mean, it's a trend in Major League Baseball where stuff like this is just becoming more and more exciting, which is great. I mean, it's not on par with the NFL or even the NBA to a certain degree, but like, they are starting, it's starting to get back to a little bit more popular culture. When you see stuff like this, it's fun. And, who doesn't like seeing a dude throw 102 past somebody? But I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And the crazy thing with Skenes is like, he's just good with it. Like he blocks a lot of it out. He's not somebody who pays attention to a lot of the external stuff, but like, he gets it. He's fine, kind of clings to the people close to him and just is largely unaffected by it.
Absolutely. Let's switch topics to other thing the Pirates are doing. We'll get to their series. You wrote an interesting piece about Andrew McCutchen talking about basically like, hey, he's batting 216. Yeah, he's had some rough stretches here, but you pointed that as like some of this is kind of just luck for lack of a better word. But what did you get out of your study of Andrew McCutchen and what he's been doing this year as far as his production?
Poor guy. I guess I may, feel bad for somebody making $5 million, but you know what? Like, dude, he's had the worst luck I think I've ever seen, Chris. This interview started in Wrigley. I went up to him. I said, Kutch, I literally have not seen a baseball player hit balls as hard as you have and not get rewarded for them for as long as you have. Like, it's crazy. For anybody who's never checked out Baseball Savant, it's like the nerdy baseball analytics page, and they give a thing. It's at the very top of it that shows, where a player ranks in percentiles, and like red is very good. And if it's the 97th percentile, right? Like that's, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. That's what Kutch's Baseball Savant page looks like. His expected slugging percentage is 507. I don't know what his actual slugging percentage. Oh, I'm sorry. 373 is his actual. I mean, he's doing everything you could possibly want to do process-wise. He's doing it great. He's not chasing. He's walking. He's hitting balls hard. He's consistently hitting them on the barrel. He's generating bat speed. He's not chasing. I don't know if I said that. But like the balls just simply aren't going anywhere productive. Batting average on balls in play, BABIP, he's getting BABIP to death. And we're starting to see it trend in the other direction. He's, for the past week, he's actually gotten rewarded for the process. But I think unlike other sports, baseball, you just can't pay as much attention to results, and people who aren't around it think that's stupid. But once you're in it, like you there's too many games, there's too many results to get hung up on every single like 0 for 4 game when you're going to take 550 at bats in a season. So we're starting to see it trend for Kutch. It's just so weird that he's done everything right except the final part.
It's more about the process, like you were getting at there. Let's talk more about the Pirates themselves here. I wanted to get your reaction to the whole series. We'll get to it in a second, but you kind of pointed this out. Like the Pirates, they won 3 out of 4 against Chicago on the road in this stretch, and one loss was very controversial with the call at the plate in the 1-0 loss that they suffered on Saturday. What was your reaction to that? Could you talk our listeners through what happened there and what's your reaction to it?
Yep. And I wanted to puke, Chris. I thought it was terrible. I really did. I'm going through all these stats and whatnot, right, that baseball makes available, and we can nerd out to the point of finding the pop time of a catcher taking the ball from here to throwing it, and average exit velocity and horizontal and vertical break, but we can't figure out a tag play. Mm-hmm. I mean, it reminded me of Jesse James and like Al Riveron and all this stuff. Like it really did. Everybody getting confused about what is the catch. Well, I had a conversation with Michael McHenry last night. Like, I don't know what a tag is, and I don't. Yeah. I don't know what a tag is. So to outline it for anybody who hasn't seen it, Cody Bellinger slides into home plate. Joey Bart accepts a throw from Michael A. Taylor. It's on the right side of the bag. So he gets it and then dives across. Now, he tags Bellinger. A lot of people were arguing with me on Twitter that he did not. He did. And I mean, that's like confirmed by Major League Baseball. Mm-hmm. Then what happens from there, Bart basically rolls over. He tries to take the ball. He takes it from his glove to his hand and tries to hold it up in the air to show Chris Conroy, the home plate umpire. He shouldn't do that, number one. Hold on to the ball until the play is complete. Like, I don't know why you have to, whatever. You can criticize Bart for that. But in the process, holds the ball up, Cody Bellinger knocks it out of his hand, and the umpire ultimately rules after a Pirates challenge that he did not complete the process of the tag. I would argue that completing the process of the tag, when you transfer a ball from your glove to your hand and then hold it up in the air, the process of the tag is then complete. I don't know how it's not. In a double play, if I catch a ball, transfer it to my throwing hand, and then I lose it, that out counts. The first out is officially recorded when I transfer the ball from my glove to my hand. But it's different at home plate. I don't understand that. I think Major League Baseball blew it. It's frustrating that something like that can cost a team a game or be a major deciding factor in a game. So, yeah, that's what happened.
You gave a lot of Pittsburghers PTSD by saying Jesse James.
Hey, man, join me in the rabbit hole because I went there. I was talking to McHenry about Jerry Meals. There's all kinds of PTSD going on here.
There certainly is. Last thing I want to touch on with you here, just now that we kind of talked about that call, the Pirates did win 3 out of 4 on the road against the Cubs, a team that they had just lost a series to. What have you seen, if anything, building from this team, or do you think they can carry this forward? They're back home for the next 6 games, playing the Giants for 3 games starting on Tuesday, and then the Braves again before they head back out on the road.
I do, Chris. I do. I do think there's something building here, a little bit of improvement made. It starts with pitching. And Paul Skenes, Jared Jones, and talk about them a little bit. Bailey Falter was the pitcher on the mound for that game Saturday, was spectacular. Mitch Keller had is having a really, really good May. Martin Perez needs to find his form from April, but whatever. The starting rotation's been good. The bullpen has not been good, but I do think there's the possibility of them getting back to it, especially the back end. If they can score enough runs, this division is very much winnable. I'm looking for them to do something with Rowdy Tellez. That's a column that I'm working on right now. I just don't see how this can possibly go on any longer. Right. Connor Joe's become this team's everyday first baseman. Nick Gonzalez was good in Chicago, and Neil Cruz has started to find his stroke. So, I mean, they're on their way back to scoring more runs, and the other parts of their game are being supported. I just, they need to start winning more games, as simple as that sounds. Like, it is time. Winning needs to take a priority to, like, getting guys going. And I'm looking for that to happen against the Giants and the Braves. 2 tough teams, obviously.
Absolutely. He's Jason Mackey, one of our great columnists here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Read all his work at post-gazette.com. Jason, thanks so much for joining us here in the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks to Ray Fittipaldo as well for joining us there as we talk about OTAs. OTAs back up for the Steelers on Tuesday, as is all the Pirates back up at home. We'll have all that updating you on the Wednesday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast from Chris Carter, Jason Mackey, and Ray Fittipaldo. Thanks for watching the North Shore Drive podcast. Back with you Wednesday here on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's podcast channel. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.